I think so. One of the things that I point people to, which is slightly paradoxical, is because it's very easy to get bleak and overwhelmed. We can look outside, and here we look at the smoke in the air, or you can look at just take your pick, and you can look at any number of ecosystems that are under stress and feel depressed. And so one of the things that I try to emphasize is the importance of also noticing what's not dying, right? What's, springtime, the migrating birds coming back, the bees that are pollinating the flowers still, and the rain that's still falling from the sky, and the cumulus clouds that are forming, and the tomatoes that you're growing in your garden, and like just taking joy in the fact that, the earth and nature is profoundly resilient, and there's, even in the midst of the chaos and the crisis and the challenges, there's also beauty, and there's emergence and growth and spring, and as I mentioned, like being in northern New Mexico, in Colorado, the wildflowers this year, because it was a good monsoon year, and let's rejoice in that. Even though it's been a 20-year drought in the Southwest, this summer was a good year, and look at how nature rebounds with tremendous resilience just with a few good weeks of rain. So I think it's really important that we pay attention to beauty, to joy, to nurturing and nourishing that part, because if we're going to be resilient, and we need to be, this is going to be for the rest of our lives, we're going to be dealing with the climate and ecological crisis, we need to stay nourished. And we can't just read, bleak data. It's not what inspires us, not what moves us. It's love that moves us, and it's care that moves us. So the more that we can connect with the beauty, and of course, when we connect with beauty, we might also feel sad. We go in, like I'll hike in Muir Woods, which is a beautiful redwood grove here, and I'll rejoice in the just the amazing 1,000-year-old trees, and I'll also know that 96% of those redwood forests got cut down, and it's holding both, and then rejoicing the fact that these forests remain, and the seeding, with that number, that 4% will grow, because there's a lot of restorative efforts going on, and so that's an important piece, and then. There was this lovely Venn diagram that one of the co-founders, writers, producers of the Project Drawdown, I forget her name, she was the ED of that nonprofit. She had this great, and she's not the only person who's speaking about this, if you imagine three circles, and three circles represent different facets of how we respond to any crisis, but including the one climate crisis. And one is what needs to happen is one. So one circle is what needs to happen, and that might be growing local food. Like I was teaching retreat, and one activist on the last retreat I taught, she said, I live downtown Denver, and one of the most effective things you can do is, if you have a garden anywhere, particularly in a city, is to grow native plants. You say when you grow native plants, it attracts the native insects, and the insects attract the native birds, and suddenly you create this whole flourishing ecosystem. And if a whole bunch of gardens in that neighborhood suddenly you have a little corridor through the city for birds, and then of course it attracts raptors and it attracts butterflies, and like we could all plant a few native plants, unless you don't have a garden or a yard, So what needs to happen? Growing local food, restoring local ecosystems, right? And we could do that in our own garden. And the second thing is, what's my skill set, right? So for me, what needs to be done is, educate people about the climate crisis, turn people onto the beauty of nature. My skill set is leading wilderness nature stuff, so I do that. But the third thing, which we often forget about, is what brings me joy. And so the confluence of those three circles, the joy, the skill, and the need, is the sweet spot. right? And we often forget about the joy, right? Like I have friends who work on trying to bring in carbon tax and carbon credit trading, and like that is really important, but it doesn't excite me, right? Leading people into the woods, that excites me. So, and of course, what brings us joy is going to bring us energy. We're more likely to follow through. We're more likely to continue doing it, and it's going to be contagious. So that's a really helpful way of framing, right? There's plenty of need. We all have skill sets. And then what brings us joy. And so you just reflect for that for yourselves and for your listeners, and then see, well, what wants to happen out of that. And it might be as simple as planting a garden, or it might be getting to know your local farmers, or it might be, maybe you care about the politics of your town and making your little, town more sustainable. And so you join the town council, or you make sure you vote for someone who gets in, who cares about, sustainability. And so there's many, many ways to engage. So that's a couple of thoughts.